In the year 7069, the Empress of Russia, Catherine the Great, declared war on the Ottomans and called upon the Christians of the Black Sea to raise arms. The Balkan nations ignored the message, as they were still occupied by the Ottomans. But in the Caucasus, one man answered the call. His name, Heraclius II of Georgia. Reasons why Heraclius wanted to participate were twofold. Firstly, his kingdom, Kartli-Kakheti, was not under Turkish control. And secondly, he wanted to reclaim Javakhia, a region which the Turks conquered in the past century from Georgia. To help with the war, Empress Catherine sent 4,000 soldiers from Russia to the Caucasus, led by a Saxon general, Gottlieb Heinrich Kurt von Tottleben. Heraclius mustered a force of 7,000 men as well, and set out to meet the reinforcing army at Surami. The combined army came across the Aspindza forces, which was guarded by an army of Ottomans and Lesgians. King Heraclius concluded that the best course of action would be subduing nearby garrisons, and thus cutting the fortress from supplies. Tottleben advised to attack. He believed his cannons would easily bring down Askuri. It is also pretty likely that Tottleben took this stance just because he wanted to oppose the king's decision. Why? Well, shortly after they started marching through the Borjomi Valley, Tottleben began suggesting to take the lead of the army, as he was the representative of the empress, but was swiftly turned down by the king. Now, not wanting another escalation, Heraclius agreed to attack, and so the castle was surrounded from two sides. From one side, Georgian army attacked. From another, the Russians fired from their cannons. For 2 days, the coalition army bombarded Turks. At last, they could do no harm. Seeing this, Tottleben decided to pack up and left for Tbilisi. When Heraclius heard of this, he rushed to chase the Russians and promised Tottleben generalship if he was to return.
But Tottleben declined, saying that they did not have enough supplies for the army to continue fighting. The king assured the general he had allied men in nearby villages, who could reinforce them with food and all the resources they needed. But still, Tottleben was not coming back, and could only apologize to the king as his army left the region.
This action sent shockwaves across the Georgian army. Rumors began spreading that the reasons why Russians left was because the Ottoman army was 5 times bigger. Turks took notice of this and attacked before the anxiety in the Christian army died down. This allowed them to push the Georgians back, even taking 80 men as hostages.
The incident exaggerated worries of losing even more, and many began thinking about aborting the mission. But King Heraclius refused to flee. Although he didn't wish to go back, he knew he would not be able to take Askuri. When Georgians left Tbilisi, he decided to take only 3 cannons with him, since Tottleben was going to bring artillery. Now that the Russians were gone, the position was unsustainable. To make matters worse, it was at this moment that Heraclius was informed. There was an Ottoman army coming from Aspindza to aid the Turkish garrison. The Georgians had to move fast. King Heraclius decided to face the army on their road to Aspindza, since fighting this army while sieging the fortress would be impossible. The king lifted the siege and set out to take on the reinforcing army. Since the terrain was rather unknown to the Georgian, their army moved very slowly. When Lesgians learned of the reason why the Christians were on the move, they immediately stormed out from the castle, took a shorter route and met with the Ottomans before Georgians could. The now combined army, which numbered 2,000 men, attacked the Georgians when they were trying to take a turn at Idumala. Half of the Georgian army was far behind, and the vanguard was ill prepared. This caused chaos in the army, and troops began retreating. But King Heraclius personally charged at the enemy. When soldiers saw their king fighting the enemy alone, they immediately turned back to help him. Now, however, The Georgians absolutely decimated the Ottomans, prompting them to flee and killing thousands of them in the process.
But the main trial for the Georgian army was still coming. Not even a few hours had passed after the melee fight, when a messenger told Heraclius that the Pasha of Akalsika himself was coming with a 10,000 men strong army to finish the Georgians off. At that time, Heraclius' camp had only 4,000 men remaining capable of battle. Others were either dead or injured. Furthermore, thousands of these were Tatars, who the king could not possibly trust. It was at moments like these when Heraclius' sharp mind and superb skills of generalship would shine. And this time was no different. The king knew occupying a good position for the army was a must, so he immediately began searching for such. He soon chose highlands of Aspindza to be his battleground. It was a distance of only 2 kilometers from the Kura river. Then, he split his army in 3, one headed by him, the other by his son and successor, Leon, and the third one led by David or Veliani. Now, it was time to camp out and rest. But the Ottomans arrived and filled the long but narrow plains. Fortunately, night came and fighting was postponed for the next day.
As soon as the morning arrived, the Turkish army began advancing, came at a firing distance from the Georgians, and started firing. The bullets kept coming, but they could do no harm to the well-positioned army. Ottomans still hoped they'd easily annihilate Christians, since no shots were fired by the Georgians yet. They assumed the fear factor must have been in the play, and confidently got closer to their foes. In reality, it was no fear, rather strategy. Heraclius had commanded his soldiers not to shoot until Ottomans would come very close. And as the enemy got near, Heraclius gave the signal, and Georgians bombarded them, killing the first line of the enemy immediately. But the second Ottoman line didn't even flinch. They continued marching and simply walked past their dead comrades. Although brave, this was not the brightest idea, and they got streamrolled as well. Then the third line came forward, only to share the same fate. Seeing this, the fourth line of soldiers decided staying in place would be wiser. Little did they know, they were in the shooting range of Georgians as well. 2,000 arrows came from above. To make matters worse, since the Ottomans were cramped together and being fired at from higher altitude, almost every Georgian fired arrow reached its intended target. Now it became obvious that the only way to survive was fleeing. As the Ottomans began retreating, the king ordered his army to run down and confront the enemy in a melee. When the Turks saw this, they stopped running and charged at the enemy as well. A noble steed came forward. On that steed sat Koktabeladi, leader of the Ottomans, and challenged Georgians to a duel. It was accepted, and the valiant knight soon charged at him. This knight was King Heraclius himself. Heraclius defeated the Turk with one blow. This proved to be the final nail in the Ottoman coffin, and Muslims started running away. They sought to make their way to the other side of the Kura river, but it was not to be. Unbeknownst to them, the king had sent men the previous night to the bridge of the river and commanded them to damage it, just enough for it to continue standing. When the Ottomans tried to cross it, the bridge fell and took the Turks with it.